Hi there, and welcome to this week's update with empowering and easy to understand news brought to you by myself, Verashni Pillay, and the Explained.co.za team. In this week's edition, we're looking at how we need to get voting and vaxxed before we can finally enjoy December. First up, our take: gear up for elections. Dust off your tatty old green book or double check that your smart ID is safely in your wallet. Local government elections are just 10 days away. As we reported last week, power is shifting and your vote can lead to meaningful change. But what's this election all about? There are two areas at play here. Firstly, your ward, which is your smaller neighborhood area, and your larger area, either a city, which is a metro, or a municipality that sits under a district municipality. Now, these cities and municipalities are responsible for delivering services like water, electricity, and sanitation. So essentially, in these elections, you're voting for who manages your taxes and service delivery in your neighborhood. Now, if you live in one of South Africa's 8 metros, you'll get 2 ballot papers. One for the party you want in charge of your city, that's your mayor, and one for your ward councillor, who will represent your area in the city's council. Now, the process is slightly different if you live outside a major city. Don't worry, we've got you. See our hand explain on our website for all those details. But how do you know who's running? Well, there's a nifty tool where you can do that. It's called mycandidate.opencitieslab.org. And you can use that. You just type in your address and you will find your ward councillor. You can then find out who they are and check out their manifestos and try to talk to them to find out what they're planning to do. Now, unfortunately, finding out how to get hold of those people is not that easy. You can get their name from that tool, but information about how to get hold of them is often woefully unavailable, even from the parties who are putting them forward. Your local WhatsApp group may be a good way to trace them, as they are often people who are known in the neighborhood. Another useful approach as you prepare to vote is to check out how those who have been running your area have performed. Now, News24 has launched a really comprehensive dashboard called outoforder.news24.com, and that will give you more insight into your municipality's current state of affairs and its past performance. They look at every municipality in the country across a range of metrics to give each one a rating out of 100. Now, the good thing about these elections is that there's pretty much something for everyone party-wise on the ballots. Daily Maverick has done a great roundup of party manifestos, which you can look for if you search on their website. Now, coalitions will be key in these elections. We'll explain more about the how and why of coalitions next week. For now, start paying attention to your mayoral candidates' campaigns or try quizzing your local reps. That's if you can find them. Good luck with that. Moving on to the big story this week. It was a slow news week, but one ruling really grabbed the nation's attention. It was about rape. Now, many of us think of the law as being written in stone. It's actually open to wide interpretation. There's been harsh criticism this week of how Tembeka Nxumalo, who is usually our favorite advocate, interpreted the law in a rape case. Nxumalo, in his role as an acting judge at the High Court in Makhanda, aka Grahamstown, overturned a lower court's rape conviction against paramedic Loyiso Koko. He and a fellow judge said the lower court's ruling was wrong in terms of South Africa's laws. This has prompted fierce debate. Some legal experts question whether the judgment was in keeping with the current law at all. Some say it was, but most agree our regressive laws on rape must change. Under the relevant act, the state has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the accused in a rape case unlawfully and, here's the key word, intentionally committed sexual penetration with a complainant without their consent. Now, if the person who's being accused of rape simply says they thought it was consensual, in their head it was consensual, and they can advance any evidence to support the fact that they thought it was consensual, it's incredibly difficult for the state to prove that it was rape. It's all about their intention and how they perceive the situation, which is very problematic. In other countries like the US, there's been a move towards lowering the burden of proof to reasonable belief of consent, not just intention, and that would increase conviction rates when it comes to rape. In our country, conviction rates are still very, very low. It's very hard to get a conviction for rape. But it's worth noting that beyond the legal debate, our courts cannot be the singular arbiters for social justice. Just because an act doesn't measure up to the legal definition of rape doesn't mean it wasn't wrong in a larger sense. The complainant's testimony was harrowing. She said that despite making it clear she only wanted to engage in oral sex, Koko ignored her and during the act kept saying sorry in her ear. The judges found bizarrely that because no force or threats were used to coerce the complainant, Koko could not be proven to be guilty of rape. Now look, if this case makes it all the way to the Concourt on appeal, it could address the problematic burden of proving intent. We certainly hope so. Moving on to your briefs, a cork in Benang's Champopo ownership. Sparkling wine, usually the symbol of a good time, represents something closer to sour grapes for one of South Africa's most popular celebrities, Bonang Matheba. She's locked in a battle with her former management company over her sparkling wine, House of B&G. The bubbly is a top seller thanks to Bonang's association with it, but now it appears her ownership of the brand is in question. Matheba claims that CSA went behind her back in dealing with her winemaking partners and tried to cut her out as shareholder. The CSA, meanwhile, says that Matheba developed the brand with their backing and help. Contractually speaking, they say they own House of B&G. We haven't seen the contract, so we can't make a call, but the issue does not sit well with many South Africans. Matheba's highly valuable name and face simply used to sell a product that someone says she cannot own. It's particularly touchy given that the product in question is sparkling wine, long the purview of South Africa's moneyed white elites. Matheba became the first black woman to be accredited by South Africa's Methode Cap Classique Association in 2019, thus vouches for the wine having been made in the traditional French way. In September 2020 last year, Matheba announced that House of B&G had become Woolworth's top-selling MCC brand. So it's done really well, and it's kind of bizarre that she might not get ownership of this thing that's been named after her. It is worth noting, however, that according to CSA, Matheba still earns royalties for every sale made. The CSA now says it wants out of the business. We'll be watching the drama from the sidelines with a bottle of bubbles to hand, naturally. On to some COVID-related news, some really good news here. COVID-19 infections in South Africa have dramatically dropped. If you had to look at a graph of the third wave, infections have plummeted and the wave is well and truly over. The pandemic, however, is not. But look, over the past week, daily new infections average around 600 a day. At the third wave's height in July, new cases were sometimes spiking close to 20,000 a day. Meanwhile, 11 million South Africans have been fully vaccinated. Less than a third of the number needed to reach herd immunity, but way better than the paltry 200,000 we were sitting at in March. Plus, news that children aged 12 to 18 can now get vaccinated could be a game changer. This potentially adds around 6 million people to the country's vaccination program, bringing us closer to those 40 million that we need to vaccinate in order to reach herd immunity. Now, as a parent, if you have a child between the ages of 12 and 18, you should know that the Children's Act actually states that children aged 12 and older can consent to their own medical treatment. This means it's up to your kids if they want to get vaxxed or not. But we do encourage you to educate your children on the importance and benefits of getting the jab. Tell them it increases their chances of going on vacation, for instance. We bet that will work. On to some travel news. Do you remember traveling internationally? It's back in large part, and you may be considering going overseas for that much-needed December holiday. So, what do you need to know given that COVID-19 remains an uncomfortable reality? Skyscanner.net is a nifty tool that lets you know which countries are safe for travel depending on what passport you have. They report that South Africans can travel to around 90 countries which have low to moderate level restrictions. These include Brazil, Mexico, Mauritius, and the United Kingdom, which recently opened travel to vaccinated individuals who will no longer need quarantine on arrival, which was a very expensive process. Now, it's important to look at your dream destination's requirements and restrictions. Plus, remember to get your vaccination certificate from the vaccine online portal in South Africa, if you haven't already done so yet. It will make your life so much easier than the cardboard version, which many countries don't accept. Most countries require you to be vaccinated or quarantined for a period of 10 to 14 days, so make sure you know before you arrive. Others will require you to provide a negative PCR test result upon arrival. So before you pack your swimsuit with matching mask and summer hats, make sure all these items are organized. Moving on to some of last week's news. In case you missed it, cabinet ministers were in a hostage drama last week. When the word South Africa defense minister and hostage hit local and international headlines last week, it kind of screamed Hollywood, but not in a good way. In case you missed it, last Thursday, our Defence and Military Veterans Minister, Thandi Modise, her deputy, Thabang Makwetla, and Minister in the Presidency, Mondli Gungubele, were ironically left, quote-unquote, defenceless. Thanks, Twitter, for that one. They were held against their will by so-called military veterans in a Pretoria hotel conference room for a few hours. Now, police managed to defuse the situation with minimum harm. The brief siege related to a long-standing dispute. People claiming to be anti-apartheid heroes, though the age of some of the vets calls that into questions, are demanding payouts of 4 million rand each. The ministers were held when they started packing their bags to leave after the ridiculous demand was reiterated. Though no one was seriously harmed, the latest event, as Bloomberg reported, has left the government red-faced. It brings the state of our security under scrutiny, especially coming so soon after the July lootings and unrest. Now, more than 50 veterans were arrested and charged with crimes that include kidnapping. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana has tried to downplay the incident, saying it was isolated and should not deter investors. We think government should not have met with these so-called vets in the first place, and that ministers should instead focus their energy on more pressing matters. On to some good news. We previously told you that our national wallet, the Treasury, got a boost thanks to a commodities boom, giving the economy a temporary lift recently. Now we're also happily seeing the rand basking in some glory too. Last month, economists said the local currency had become the world's, wait for it, best performing emerging market currency, also thanks to that commodities boom. Now, what does that mean? The rand competes with other emerging market currencies like the Brazilian real and the Turkish lira. Their performance is usually determined by both local and international events, so they fluctuate literally by the second. When the rand is on a stronger footing, it becomes more desirable for international investors, giving us more buying power for those international trips, obviously. This week, economists have said the rand is continuing its winning streak, reaching its strongest level in a month, hovering around the 14 rand to the dollar mark. If all goes well, including elections, we'll likely see the rand retain its shine. On to some international news. Pro-democracy protests in Eswatini, previously known as Swaziland, have left at least one person dead and around 80 others injured. Protests led by students, civil society, civil servants and transport workers flared up about 2 weeks ago. Things turned violent in Africa's last absolute monarchy yesterday when security forces used live ammunition against protesting nurses, about 30 of whom were injured. The kingdom also cut access to the internet yesterday, making it difficult for citizens to share information and images of the protests with each other and online. Eswatini is led by King Mswati III, who lives lavishly with 15 wives while ordinary citizens grapple with extreme poverty. The latest burst of violence has prompted President Cyril Ramaphosa, who chairs the Southern African Development Community, to send high-level envoys to the neighbouring country to engage King Mswati III on security and political developments, Al Jazeera reported. Now, the news organization added that security forces have fired tear gas and rubber bullets at even small gatherings. Concerned citizens say the king is looking for a war by deploying armed forces against protesters. Moving back to local news, in case you missed it, former President Jacob Zuma was released from prison last Thursday on medical parole. We've told you before how problematic it was when a top official last month overturned the medical parole board's decision to not grant him parole. So much for that 15-month jail sentence. Now, his supporters were jubilant upon his release, celebrating with a welcoming prayer at Durban's People's Park. Zuma attended virtually, quite sensibly. But it's what happened next that has the country really talking. If one is released for medical reasons, you need to firstly stay in your house and secondly rest, obviously. Instead, the former president was spotted leaving Sabaya Casino in KZN with two of his besties, Carl Niehaus and former SAA chair Dudu Myeni. Now, whether he was living it up or not, South Africa's law shouldn't be played like a roulette wheel. Still, while he's out of prison, he's not out of the legal woods and still faces trial. Any day now, we swear, on charges related to the arms deal. On to another story that keeps popping up in the headlines, so we thought we'd break it down for you. Oscar Mabuyane, he's the Eastern Cape Premier, and he is in our public protector's sights. That's Busisiwe Mkhwebane. She recently released a report finding that he and local public works MEC, Babalo Madikizele, may have criminally benefited from over 1 million rand that had been meant for Winnie Madikizele's memorial service in 2018, that was Nelson Mandela's former wife. According to the report, Mabuyane allegedly bagged nearly R500,000 rand from that money, which was used to upgrade his East London home. What is Woodcroft of politicians and all the home upgrades? Now look, Mkhwebane isn't the most reliable person when it comes to reports, and we're hard-pressed to believe anything that she says, given how many times her reports have been slammed in court, but this does sound serious. The ANC's top decision-making body in the province, the PEC, has asked the duo to answer to the party's local integrity commission, given that they both have previously faced allegations of misusing funds. Now, the Premier, Mabuyane, has of course denied it all and headed to court to overturn Mkhwebane's report. Now, you may be wondering, shouldn't Mabuyane step aside as per the ANC's famous new rule, like Ace Magushele was forced to do? But this rule, the step-aside rule, only kicks into action when a person has been formally charged, criminally charged. So a quick explain on how that happens. The public protector can only make recommendations. She cannot formally or criminally charge any person. The way that happens is that the police or the Hawks, if it's serious, are responsible for an investigation. Then the National Prosecuting Authority takes a look at the results of the investigation and decides if there is enough evidence to present a case before a judge. Only then is the person formally charged. Now, the Hawks told the Mail and Guardian that they have concluded their 2-year investigation into the misused funds, as per Mkhwebane's recommendations, and are now impatiently waiting for the NPA to take action and to take the matter to court. The Eastern Cape is one of the worst-run provinces in South Africa. Let's hope that this heads to court soon. On to your final brief. Movie theatres are open. Here's what to watch. It's been a lifetime since we've seen a movie on the big screen, but now we can. Plus, your support would help support cinema chains that have long suffered thanks to the pandemic. Ster-Kinekor entered into business rescue in January, but insiders say things are looking promising now as some great movies are on circuit and the lockdown level allows us to go. So what's out there? Firstly, Daniel Craig is back in his last turn as James Bond with No Time to Die, released earlier this month to record audiences. Critics felt it was bloated at nearly 3 hours, but maybe the filmmakers were trying to make up for lost time. Another movie that you should watch out for is the modern remake of Dune, starring Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya, in a must-see for fans of Frank Herbert's famous science fiction epic novel. It's already showing in cinemas in South Africa. Julianne Moore, meanwhile, and Amy Adams star in a beautiful musical that taps into mental illness and the feeling of belonging. Catch it on November 23rd at New Metro. And if you want to enjoy a movie with the whole family, you can catch the animated film The Addams Family sequel. In terms of local content, the sequel to comedian Riyad Musa's wildly successful 2012 film Material is coming. The film is called New Material and stars the hilarious Joey Rastin, Riyad Musa, and Skulk Bezuidenhout and is out November 26th. Follow the new COVID protocols to watch responsibly and enjoy. That's it from us at The Wrap, an award-winning product of Explain.co.za. Simple news summaries for busy people. The Wrap is sponsored by Explain's agency division. We specialize in content marketing for purpose-driven organizations, often with a pan-African reach. Mail info@explain.co.za for a quote. Meanwhile, remember to share the love, tell your friends to sign up for the updates at explain.co.za/subscribe. Till next time, goodbye from me and the team.